Very grateful to have Bishop Waddell here and his wife Carol. Bishop W. Christopher Waddell was born in Los Angeles, California on June 28, 1959, and married Carol Stansel in July 1984, and they are proud parents of four children. He was named first counselor in the Presiding Bishopric of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on October 3rd, 2020. And he was named a General Authority 70 on April 2nd, 2011, and served in that capacity until his call as second counselor of the Presiding Bishopric in October 2015. Bishop Waddell received a bachelor's degree in 1984 from San Diego State University, and beginning in 1984, he worked with Merrill Lynch in several positions, including first vice president of investments. Bishop Waddell has served in numerous church callings, including a full-time missionary in Spain, bishop, high counselor, and counselor in a mission presidency, stake president, and president of the Spain-Barcelona Mission in Area 70. Beyond that, he's a wonderful person. I've spent a little time with him the last couple of days, and we're very grateful to have him here. Please welcome Bishop Waddell.
Well, it is an honor to be with you. I realize that some of that biography that you read, there are probably plenty of people that have no idea what any of those things mean, and that's fine. But it's wonderful to be with you. My wife and I have been in Utah now for just over 6 years. As was mentioned, I was born in Los Angeles. I was born and raised in the LA area. We raised our family in San Diego, and we love our time in Utah. We have a view of the Great Salt Lake. It reminds us of our view of the Pacific Ocean where we lived in San Diego. But the Pacific Ocean is still the same size. The Great Salt Lake is shrinking a bit. And so we realize that we all have a need to do something about that. But I am honored and grateful to be able to represent the church today. We're grateful, I'm speaking on behalf of the church, grateful for the invitation to participate in such a significant event as this symposium and for the work that's being done. I'm grateful for the things that have been said this morning. I'm not going to be quite as exciting as Governor Cox was. Watched him a little bit on the screen, and grateful for Speaker Wilson as well, and all who have participated in this event. I will apologize. I'm probably going to read most of my remarks that are prepared remarks. When you speak in a general conference at church, you have a big giant teleprompter that you're reading, and I don't have that today, so I'll be reading most of my remarks, but grateful again for the opportunity to be here. The Great Salt Lake, as we know, is one of the nation's true landmarks and an important resource for our community since 1847, and for the Native peoples prior to that. On behalf of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I'm also grateful to add my voice, our voice, as I said, to what has been said thus far today and yesterday, along with others who are engaged in this ongoing dialogue regarding the challenges we face and the solutions that are needed. Bishop Gerald Cosset, who's the presiding bishopric of the church, presented an address titled Our Earthly Stewardship in the church's semi-annual general conference in October of last year. Speaking to people worldwide, Bishop Cosset taught, quote, "The care of the earth and of our natural environment is a sacred responsibility entrusted to us by God, which should fill us with deep sense of duty and humility. It is also an integral component of our discipleship." Just days after that general conference, Bishop Todd Budge, the second counselor in the presiding bishopric, delivered a message on environmental stewardship at the Why It Matters conference, highlighting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals held at Utah Valley University. Bishop Budge said, "When it comes to taking care of the earth, we cannot afford to think only of today." He then continued, "The consequences of our actions, for better or worse, accumulate into the future and are sometimes felt only generations later. Stewardship requires feet and hands at work in the pretext with a gaze fixed on the future." He then shared various ways the church is striving to holistically improve its wise stewardship of natural resources, including agricultural land management, land management, energy management, and most relevant to our topic today, water conservation. And what I'd like to do in my remarks is divide them really up into three parts. I'd like to talk a little bit, and I'll share a little bit about the history of the church's involvement, and then current efforts, and then looking at future plans and the things that we're looking at to what can take place later on. So beginning with the historical efforts, the Latter-day Saints story, as most people know, the story in the Great Basin began in July of 1847 when the first company of the pioneers arrived. As Apostle Wilford Woodruff entered the Salt Lake Valley, he was deeply impressed with what he saw. He said this, especially notable to him was the large lake of salt water that stretched before his eyes. The pioneers entered a region where Native American groups such as the Ute, the Paiute, and the Shoshones had managed water resources for hundreds of years. Because of reports from earlier explorers, the Saints understood that rain alone was not sufficient to water crops in the arid Great Basin. They would need to draw from the streams, the rivers, and lakes, following the examples of the Native Americans and Hispanic settlers that came before them. Almost immediately after reaching the valley floor, the pioneers built a diversion dam on what would become known as City Creek. And they dug a ditch so that water from the stream could soak the ground for crop cultivation. Over the next several decades, the Latter-day Saint leaders helped communities construct irrigation networks that brought water to fields and enabled agricultural production. The Saints became known for irrigation innovations and their ability to construct works that supplied water to vast expanses of land, stemming from their desire to be wise stewards and not waste this precious resource. In an 1865 meeting with congregations from both Box Elder and Cache counties, Brigham Young taught, quote, "We should waste nothing, but make everything in some way or other minister to our wants and independence." Although today we recognize that there are times when water needs to be conserved, even if it could be used beneficially, Brigham Young believed that beneficial use reflected responsible stewardship over water. He also advocated for water to be held as a public resource and not in private ownership, which was a radical notion by standards of mid-19th century America. The perspective of water as a community resource shifted over time as more settlers moved into Utah territory and as the church itself became increasingly removed from farming and irrigation. This shift has continued over time, and actually, although the church still owns and operates some agricultural properties in Utah, it represents less than 3% of the agricultural land in the state. The 19th century saints continued to view rivers, streams, and lakes as important and vulnerable resources, and not just meant for irrigation. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, the church operated what was referred to as the Inland Crystal Salt Company that extracted salt from the lake and sold it throughout the American West. It also became involved in promoting recreation of the Great Salt Lake. For example, the church helped found the Salt Air Beach Company in 1891, and Salt Air became a popular destination for locals and visitors alike. Aside from the aesthetic of the lake that Wilford Woodruff found so pleasing in 1847, the lake had become a useful resource for the church and for everyone living in Utah. In 1937, however, there's a big change, as the Improvement and Beautification Committee was established under the welfare program of the church and recommended landscaping practices for church members and church buildings, including the planting of lawns, which, as you can see from this image, was greatly needed. The idea in the United States that well-maintained lawns were a desirable component of landscaping stemmed from the mid-19th century. Originally, only wealthy Americans with large manor estates had lawns. But after the Civil War, they became a status symbol for the middle class. A proliferation of lawns occurred in the 20th century, especially after golf grew in popularity in the 1920s. Acting on these larger trends, the Improvement and Beautification Committee promoted the planting of lawns at the church's chapels. Church leaders approved of this practice, in part because they wanted meeting house grounds to look clean and beautiful in preparation for the 1947 centennial celebration of the arrival of the pioneers to the Salt Lake Valley. The appearance of church and community buildings and homes, the First Presidency declared, mirrors the pride and industry of a people. In more recent years, the impact that caring for these lawns could have on water supplies has become more apparent, which is why we're here today. When drought affected Utah and other western states at the turn of the 21st century, the Presiding Bishopric implemented conservation measures for the watering of church lawns including a 25% reduction in the amount of water used for landscaping and recommending the use of higher mower settings so that grass could retain more moisture. So that's a bit of the history. Now moving forward to more current efforts. In addition to steps that we can take individually and collectively, and that's been shared very clearly, the need for all to be involved in this, we also believe in a higher power that can be called upon. In an official statement made in June of last year on the importance of water conservation, the church invited its members to join with friends of other faiths in prayer to our Heavenly Father for rain and respite from the devastating drought, emphasizing that we all play a part in preserving the critical resources needed to sustain life, especially water, and we invite others to join us in reducing water use wherever possible. As the Apostle James teaches us in the New Testament, we must show our faith by our works, for faith, if it hath not works, is dead. Through our efforts, though our efforts have not been and are still not perfect, and we recognize that, there is a continual and ongoing church-wide effort to improve our care of natural resources, including the implementation of best practices and available technology to improve our water efficiency. I'll share a few of the steps that are being taken, which we believe will make a difference. On our farm properties, for example, we have installed soil moisture, I've worked on saying those two words together, soil moisture probes, to inform irrigation decisions and the implementation of drip and microjet irrigation systems for appropriate crops. We perform regular maintenance and replace irrigation nozzles to maintain uniform water coverage. We individually tailor center pivot irrigation system programming to apply water at a variable rate based on soil types and observed low areas. And we are currently developing water management plans for all of our agricultural properties. Finally, we continue to install smart controllers, hydrometers, rain sensors, and drip irrigation systems across our many meeting houses, temples, and other facilities, and are encouraged to see positive impacts from these efforts. For example, from 2018 to 2022, to the end of 2022, we've saved approximately 40 million gallons of water each year at church headquarters. We're grateful for diligent efforts of remarkable employees who monitor our irrigation systems, as well as our indoor plumbing, cooling, and other systems, and whose efforts have identified opportunities to improve our water efficiency. In the early 2000s, a department referred to as the Meeting House Facilities Department began to adapt meeting house landscape standards by ecoregions within the state to better incorporate water-wise principles of regionally appropriate plant material accompanied by a reduction of lawns. This meant a transition away from more traditional landscaping, which included 80 to 90% lawns, towards a standard of 35 to 40% lawn for landscapes at new meeting houses, incorporating more water where grass species, water-wise grass species in plant varieties. Our current plan also includes specific practices for pre-growing, growing, and post-growing seasons. These practices include the implementation and monitoring of irrigation systems, adjustment of irrigation controls to comply with water restrictions and the weather, delaying first watering as long as possible, and applying water-saving products to lawn areas such as wetting agents and surfactants. The last item is actually the primary reason why some of our lawns maintain a little bit of green appearance despite a reduction in water usage. In 2022, as a result of these efforts, water use at our Salt Lake County meeting houses was reduced by 35% compared with 2020. Therefore, we are grateful to our contractors, facility managers, and local leaders who have helped us in this effort. Once again, we acknowledge that our efforts have not been perfect, and we invite church and community members to contact local church leadership if they observe any instances where best practices are not actually practiced. We encourage local leaders to be watchful stewards to ensure that our intended water management practices are appropriately executed and report any concerns to church headquarters. Now, looking forward beyond church headquarters in Salt Lake County, we are grateful for the many efforts being made on the BYU campus in Provo to reduce water consumption. In the past 2 decades, the university has reduced its culinary water use by 2/3, even as its building footprint has grown. Outdoors, BYU conducts regular water audits and uses smart irrigation systems and water-wise landscaping, including drought-tolerant plants and mulch made of campus green waste, food scraps, grass clippings, and wood chips. This mulch reduces water usage in flower and shrub beds by 30%. In response to heightened water concerns over the last decade, most of BYU's campus is now watered using secondary sources. The Water Master monitors stream flows and reduces flows, depending on conditions, by as little as 20% in spring to as much as 100% in late summer. As needed, campus lawns go dormant during dry spells. Additionally, on and off campus, BYU faculty contribute research on sustainable water supply, farming, and the Great Salt Lake. In addition to these water-wise efforts, in 2022, the church established what is referred to as a Sustainability Office and Sustainability Leadership Committee under the direction of the Presiding Bishopric. The purpose is to develop key cross-functional initiatives within church operations. We've expanded our teaching of the guiding principle of wise stewardship to emphasize the need to care for our natural resources and encourage our global employees to lead out in their efforts to implement creative solutions within the church operations that protect the future for all of God's children. So now moving to the future. Our ability to be wise stewards of the earth is dependent on our understanding of the natural resources we've been blessed with. As our understanding of the environment grows, so does our opportunity to align our practices with the environmental realities we face, allowing for the implementation of practical and effective localized solutions. We are indebted to the subject matter experts who study the conditions of the Great Salt Lake and the impacts and future risks of its declining water levels. We're grateful for the legislative changes that Speaker Wilson pointed out, many of them. We're grateful for those changes that create new opportunities to benefit the lake and the many organizations working to bring awareness to this issue. With greater understanding of the lake and of the solutions needed to help preserve it, we are positioned to improve our stewardship of this significant and critical resource. As a church, we are committed to be part of the solution to help the Great Salt Lake and have made some initial efforts to contribute. As was recently announced in the press release, and as Speaker Wilson just mentioned, and we're grateful for the comments, we're grateful for the expressions of appreciation regarding the contribution. But at the same time, we recognize that this is just a small part. We're grateful to be able to have participated, and grateful that I'm getting off script here. We're grateful that this effort working with the state will allow that water to be saved in perpetuity. That was a significant aspect of that donation, wanting to make sure that it would be able to continue, that it wouldn't be used for other things in the future. And so we're grateful for that. Well, thank you. We realized, hopefully there are a lot of applauses for a lot of different people and a lot of organizations going forward, because we realize this is just a start, but we're grateful to participate in that. One of the comments that was made, the shares do provide approximately 20,000 acre feet, which is the equivalent of the amount of water to 20,000 single-family home connections. So we're grateful for that. And one of the items that we really appreciated on that is this donation will help preserve critical shoreline and wetland habitat in Farmington Bay. So we are happy to support the state's plans to improve water measurement and management, and truly hope that this will facilitate and encourage future similar transactions, not just additional ones from the church, which will come, but from others as well. Now, in accordance with HB 33, which was passed last year, we're also conducting an evaluation to identify other church-owned water assets that can feasibly be delivered to the Great Salt Lake, a continuation of our efforts that began in 2021. As a first priority, we are evaluating the water assets within the 5 counties surrounding the Great Salt Lake, as well as water assets delivered from Utah Lake, all of which we expect will have the highest likelihood of successful delivery to the lake. So it's not a matter of just looking for anything. We want the things that will actually make a difference to the Great Salt Lake. We know that every bit helps, and we do invite other water asset owners to consider the new opportunities afforded by recent legislative changes and determine how they might help in this important effort. We thank a large group of individuals and departments: the Utah Department of Natural Resources and its divisions of water rights, forestry, fire, and state lands and wildlife resources, the Nature Conservancy and National Audubon Society, co-managers of the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust, as well as subject matter experts from Brigham Young University, Utah State University, and many others that have met and consulted with our internal teams. Beyond the state of Utah, and as part of our long-term water conservation plans, we are making a concerted effort to extend water-wise practices church-wide, including expanding our use of technology, water management plans, and other best practices. We will continue to incorporate these water-wise and sustainable landscaping principles at our new meeting houses and temples along the Wasatch Front, such as the use of native or adapted drought-tolerant plants and trees, as is demonstrated by this landscape design rendering for a future meeting house in Vineyard. On a larger scale, our aim is to understand more fully what sustainable landscaping should be based on local climates, and to identify opportunities to conserve water and natural resources. This includes improving runoff water quality, collecting and reusing stormwater, mitigating the heat island effect, and integrating the landscape into the existing and regional context. We are currently working with landscape architects that are well-versed in these sustainability landscape principles and recommendations from programs such as LEAD and Sustainable Sites Initiatives as part of a retrofit pilot for select meeting houses across the state. We're excited that many of these sustainable landscaping principles are incorporated into our landscape upgrades for Temple Square and downtown headquarters properties. For example, we're implementing climate-based, this is a nice long word, evapotranspiration smart controllers. So our irrigation schedule, thank you. So our irrigation schedule will be influenced by real-time weather conditions, and we have grouped plants of light water requirements in hydro zones to further improve our watering efficiency. Now, just a few years ago in 2019, we began developing our water management strategy for new construction and retrofitting existing plants and soils. Our soils were chosen and engineered for water and nutrient holding capacity. All of our trees, shrubs, and perennial beds are watered via micro irrigation methods and were selected for their low water use characteristics. Future visitors to Temple Square, when all of that is completed, we're hoping that won't be another decade or so, it's coming along. Temple Square will notice some key changes, including more trees, less grass, and more perennial plants. Our new tree count will be increased by 30% to reduce that heat island effect and to establish tree canopies that will protect the plants below and reduce our HVAC cooling of surrounding buildings. Our turf grass, on the other hand, has been reduced by 35%, and our annuals reduced by 50%. We've also executed a turf grass summer dormancy program in which all turf grass will receive 35 to 40% less irrigation water from June to September. With all of these changes, we estimate that in the first 5 years as the landscape is being established, the total estimated water savings will be 40 to 50 million gallons from our pre-construction amounts. Once established, we estimate an additional 15 to 20 million gallons will be saved annually from those saved pre-construction amounts. As President Russell M. Nelson stated in his General Conference address in October 2021 regarding the Salt Lake City temple renovations, he said, quote, "It is now time that we each implement extraordinary measures, perhaps measures we have never taken before, to strengthen our personal spiritual foundations. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures." We're grateful for President Nelson's wise and optimistic call for continuous improvement in our spiritual lives and believe his words can be a clear guide for our efforts to be wise stewards as well. As a church, in conclusion, as the church strives to reduce its water use, we invite members of the church and community to also reduce their consumption. We encourage engagement and responsiveness to legislative changes and other recommendations from subject matter experts, recognizing the need to act with urgency and unity towards the future we hope for, one with a healthy Great Salt Lake. I echo the invitation given last June for all to pray and fast for rain and respite from the devastating drought, and for inspiration to know how we can each individually contribute to a resolution of this difficult issue. As the Lord taught the children of Israel in the Old Testament in Leviticus chapter 26, "If ye walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you rain in due season, and the land shall yield her increase, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit." We are grateful for the snow and rain we have received this season has been mentioned, though perhaps not so grateful when we're shoveling our driveways, something we're not used to from San Diego. However, we have commented, as I've spoken to my wife about that coming in after shoveling, we can't complain because this is what we prayed for. We should acknowledge God's hand in providing us this blessing and that our work is not yet done. We must continue with all diligence if we are to make the difference that is needed. May the Lord grant us all the faith and perseverance to be wise stewards of our water, our land, and the resources that flow through them. Thank you very much.